On my daughter's wedding day, a waiter took my arm and quietly led me toward the exit. His voice trembled as he said, "The bride doesn't want you to ruin her perfect day." For a moment, I couldn't move. In my hand was a small purse, the only thing I had left after giving away my entire life savings, $200,000 to pay for this very celebration. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Surely my own daughter wouldn't do this. But when I looked into the manager's eyes and saw him turn away, I knew. This was no misunderstanding. I tried to step inside, but the waiter's hand tightened on my arm. He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was her request. She wants everything to be perfect." The bride was my daughter. The same little girl I raised with these two hands that once scrubbed floors, packed her lunches, and held her close when she cried. Now those hands were shaking, not from anger, but from heartbreak. Through the glass doors, I saw her. She looked radiant in white, smiling under the soft glow of the chandeliers. Music played, laughter echoed, and guests clapped as she danced with her new husband. I stood outside nothing but a shadow, the cold wind wrapping around me like a shroud. And in that wind, I remembered every penny I'd saved for 40 long years. Every night I stayed late at work, every meal I skipped, every lonely holiday I endured, all for her future. I sold my small house, emptied my savings, and handed her $200,000. It was supposed to be my retirement fund, my security, my peace. But I gave it all away, thinking my daughter's happiness is worth more than any comfort I could ever buy. I believed love was priceless. But that day I learned love can be very, very expensive. When those grand doors shut behind me, it wasn't just the sound of rejection. It was the sound of a bond breaking, a mother being locked out of her own child's heart. A young waiter, barely older than my daughter when she left for college, gave me an apologetic look. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he whispered. "I'm just following orders." I managed a faint smile and said softly, "Don't worry, son. You're not the one breaking my heart." Then I walked away, step by step, each one heavier than the last, each one carrying 40 years of memories, her first steps, her first heartbreak, the nights I prayed over her bed, whispering promises I thought would never be broken. But promises are fragile, especially when love turns blind. I thought about all those times she'd said, "Mom, I'll take care of you when you're old." Now I had no home, no savings, and no place to go. Standing in the chill of the evening air, I could still hear her laughter, the same laugh that once filled my heart with joy, now cut through me like glass. And I asked myself, when love makes a child cruel enough to cast out her own mother, is that still love? That day I lost my daughter. I lost my $200,000. And worst of all, I lost my faith in love. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning of a lesson she would learn the hard way. My name is Helen, and I'm 67 years old. It's been 10 years since my husband passed away, yet I still remember the sound of his laugh, the way he'd call me my lucky star. He left early, a heart attack, sudden and cruel, and from that day on, my world became smaller, quieter, lonelier. But I wasn't completely alone. I still had Melissa, my only daughter, my reason to wake up every morning. She was everything I ever wanted to be: strong, beautiful, ambitious. She had her father's smile and my stubbornness. We used to talk every night over tea, share silly jokes, dream about her future. Back then, she always said, "Mom, when I get married, I'll make sure you never have to worry again." After her father's death, I sold our little house by the lake. It was too big, too empty. I moved into a small apartment and tucked away every penny I earned, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, doing whatever I could, until I had $200,000 saved. That was supposed to be my retirement fund, my ticket to a peaceful life in a quiet nursing home where I could watch the sunset and maybe make a few friends my age. I wanted to grow old with dignity, without being a burden to anyone, especially not my daughter. But when Melissa started dating David, everything began to change. He was 35, handsome, charming, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say and when to say it. He held doors open, brought flowers, smiled in that polished way that felt rehearsed. At first, I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. She looked alive again, glowing, laughing. For a while, her joy became mine. But then I started noticing things, little things. David never asked about her work, her dreams, or her favorite books. He only asked about her father's estate, about my savings, about the house we used to own. One night, I overheard him say, "With the right help, we could buy a beautiful property. Your mom must have something put away." That was when I knew. He wasn't courting my daughter's heart. He was courting her inheritance. I tried to warn her gently at first. "Melissa, I said he's handsome, yes, but love isn't built on charm. It's built on trust, and trust takes time." She laughed, brushing my hand away like I was a child who didn't understand. As the months passed, my concern turned into fear. He proposed after 6 months, a diamond ring, too big, too shiny for a man with no real job. When she showed me the ring, my heart sank. I asked her if she was sure. She frowned. "Mom, you're overthinking again. Why can't you just be happy for me?" So I tried to be, but the truth was, every instinct in me screamed, something isn't right. One evening, while we were folding laundry, I gathered my courage and said, "Honey, I know you love him, but I don't think David loves you, not the way you deserve. He doesn't love you. He loves your wallet." She froze. Then her face hardened. "You're just jealous, Mom." Her voice trembled with anger. "You're jealous because nobody loves you anymore. You can't stand seeing someone love me." Those words cut deeper than any knife. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything I'd sacrificed, every night I'd cried alone, every dream I'd buried to give her a better life. But instead, I stayed quiet. Because sometimes, silence is the only shield a mother has. She stormed out that night, slamming the door behind her. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cup of tea she'd left half-finished. The steam had gone cold, just like the space between us. Days passed before she called again. When she did, it was to tell me the wedding date. Her voice was cheerful, almost forced. "Mom, I really want this to be special. David says if we can put down a bigger payment, we can get the perfect venue." I didn't answer right away. My heart ached, but I still wanted her to have everything she dreamed of. So I asked, "How much do you need?" She hesitated, then said softly, 200,000. My chest tightened. That was everything, my entire future. But when I pictured her in a white dress, smiling, believing in love, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this was what motherhood meant. Giving even when it hurts. I sold the last few bonds I had. I withdrew every dollar from my savings. And I handed it all to her, the sum of a lifetime's work, with shaking hands and a trembling smile. She hugged me and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I promise you'll never regret this." But promises like love can fade faster than you think. That night, as I watched her drive away, laughing beside him in his shiny car, I whispered to myself, "May this money buy her happiness, not heartbreak." Deep down I knew. I'd just given her the weapon that would one day be used to break my heart. And I was right. It started with a single conversation. A quiet evening in late spring, the air warm and heavy, with the smell of lilacs. Melissa and David were sitting at my kitchen table, their hands intertwined, like they'd already built a lifetime together. David leaned forward, smiling that polished smile of his. "You know, Helen, with a little more help, we could make this wedding truly special. Maybe even buy a small house, a place we can all call home." All I asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, all 3 of us. Melissa told me how much you've done for her. You deserve to live close, to be part of our life." For a brief second, I wanted to believe him. The thought of a warm home, of Sunday dinners and shared laughter, made my tired heart flutter. But then I saw it, that flicker in his eyes. Not love, calculation. Still, before I could speak, Melissa squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, if we could just have a little more, we could put a down payment on a beautiful place. You'd have your own room. You'd never have to worry again. I'll take care of you forever." Her voice trembled with hope, and mine broke with surrender. I had planned to use that money for a quiet nursing home by the lake, a place where I could grow old gracefully, maybe plant flowers, red in peace. But what's peace compared to your child's happiness? So a week later, I withdrew the entire sum. $200,000, 40 years of labor, sealed in a single cashier's check. My hand shook as I passed it across the table. "For your future," I said, smiling, even though it hurt. "Build something beautiful, sweetheart." She threw her arms around me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom. I promise you'll never regret this." But regret doesn't come all at once. It sneaks in quietly, one small sign at a time. 3 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was the wedding invitation. The paper smelled of roses, the font elegant embossed in gold. I smiled, tracing my finger along the edges. My little girl's getting married. But when I looked closer, my smile faded. Where it should have said, "Mother of the bride, Helen Martin," it simply read guest. "Helen M." I blinked, thinking maybe it was a printing error. Surely it had to be. That evening, I called Melissa. She picked up, her voice bright and busy. "Hey, Mom, did you get the invitation? Isn't it beautiful?" "It is," I said slowly. "But my name, it says guest, Helen M. Is that just a mistake?" There was a pause. Too long. "Oh, yeah, about that," she said quickly. "The planner thought titles would make the guest list messy. We wanted everything simple." "Simple," I repeated. My throat felt dry. "Don't worry, Mom. Everyone knows who you are. You'll be sitting right in front. It'll be perfect." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think this was just a careless oversight, not a warning of what was to come. But deep down, something in me shifted. A tiny crack formed, the kind that starts small and visible but spreads fast once the weight gets heavy. A few days later, I went dress shopping with her. Or at least I thought I did. She met me outside the boutique, already holding bags. "Mom, I already found my gown. David's mom helped me pick it out." I smiled, pretending it didn't sting. I asked, "Can I see it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's a surprise. You'll love it." I noticed then, for the first time, how she kept glancing at her phone, at his messages, at his face on the screen, while mine sat silent on the table. Each day, I felt her slipping further away. The girl who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings now called me Mom in the same tone she used for strangers. Our conversations grew shorter, her patience thinner. Still, I told myself, she's just stressed. Weddings are overwhelming. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when she showed me centerpieces, nodded when she talked about seating charts, and told her she looked beautiful, even when she was too busy to hear it. But something else caught my attention, a small detail almost hidden. Every decision seemed to have David's fingerprints on it. The guest list, the venue, even the vows. He wasn't just marrying her. He was rewriting her life and erasing me from it. One evening, I overheard a conversation as I walked past her room. David's voice low and sharp. "Your mom needs to stop acting like she owns everything. This is our wedding, not hers." Melissa's reply cut deeper than I expected. "I know. Don't worry. I'll handle her. Handle me, her own mother." I stood there in the hallway, frozen, clutching the photo of her first birthday I'd been planning to bring to the ceremony. In the picture, she was wearing a pink dress, frosting on her cheeks, laughing as I held her tiny hands. Back then, she couldn't even stand without me. Now she was walking into a new life, one where I was no longer welcome. I went to bed that night staring at the invitation on my nightstand. Guest, Helen M. Not Mom, not mother of the bride, just a name, a formality. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that love didn't need a label, that all that mattered was her happiness. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "Something's wrong, Helen. You've given her everything." And still she's slipping away. And I had no idea that the worst heartbreak was yet to come. The morning of the wedding felt colder than I expected. The sky was clear, the streets alive with laughter. But inside, my heart trembled with something I couldn't quite name. Excitement, fear, hope, Maybe all of them at once. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of my dress. It wasn't fancy, just a simple pastel blue gown I'd sewn myself. Nothing extravagant, nothing to outshine the bride. I added a small silver brooch, the one my husband gave me on our anniversary, a quiet reminder that once upon a time, love had been kind. Before leaving, I took a moment to look around my small apartment, empty now, bare walls, and echoing silence. Everything I'd once owned, every piece of furniture, every keepsake had been sold or given away to make this day possible. But I didn't regret it. Not yet, because I believed this day would bring my daughter the happiness I could never buy for myself. I took a deep breath, picked up my small purse, and stepped outside. The church was beautiful. A grand stone building draped in white flowers and gold ribbons. Guests filled the stairs, laughing, taking pictures. When I reached the entrance, I smiled at the usher, an eager young man in a pressed black suit. "Good morning," I said softly. "I'm here for my daughter's wedding. My name's Helen Martin." He scanned his list, frowning. Then his eyes darted nervously toward the manager. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name's not on the list." I blinked, confused. "That can't be right. I'm the bride's mother." The manager stepped forward, his expression caught between pity and discomfort. He whispered something to the usher, then turned to me. "Ma'am, please wait here a moment." I stood there as guests brushed past me, women in sparkling gowns, men in sleek suits, all nodding politely, not realizing I was the one who'd paid for the flowers, the food, the music. After a few minutes, the manager returned. His face told me everything before he even spoke. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Martin. The bride, she's requested that you not enter." I felt the world tilt. "What?" He hesitated. She said, "Your presence might make some guests uncomfortable. She wants her ceremony to be perfect." Perfect. The word stung, like salt on an open wound. My voice trembled. "Please, there must be a mistake. I'm her mother. I paid for this wedding." He looked away. "I'm just following instructions." Behind him, I caught sight of her. Melissa, my daughter, standing at the far end of the hall, radiant in white. Her hair curled in soft waves, her veil shimmering under the chandelier. For a fleeting second, our eyes met. And in that second, I thought, she'll call out to me. She'll fix this. She'll remember who I am. But she didn't. Instead, she looked down, her lips tightening. Then quietly, she turned to the usher and said, "I'm sorry, Mom, but I need this day to be perfect." Her voice was calm, polite, the same tone she used with strangers. Something inside me cracked. I wanted to shout, to tell her, perfection isn't built on shame. But the words never came. The usher stepped aside, unsure, waiting for direction. The manager gently touched my elbow. "Ma'am, please. We can't hold up the ceremony." I felt the eyes of strangers on me, pitying, curious, maybe even judgmental. My feet felt heavy as I turned away. Each step echoed in the marble hallway, a lonely rhythm, marking the end of something I'd spent a lifetime building. Outside, the wind caught my scarf. The scent of roses drifted through the air. Through the glass doors, I saw her walking down the aisle, my daughter arm in arm with the man I'd warned her about. The guests rose to their feet, applauding. She smiled radiant like a queen. And I stood on the other side of the glass, invisible. I pressed my palm against the cold surface. On the other side, her new life was beginning. On mine, everything I'd known was slipping away. I watched as they exchanged vows, promising to love and protect each other, words that once meant something to me. I wondered if she'd remember me when the applause faded, when the music stopped, when love turned into bills and responsibilities and long, quiet nights. But in that moment, I wasn't her mother. I was a ghost. When the ceremony ended, guests flooded out laughing, tossing petals. They brushed past me without recognition. No one stopped. No one asked why I was outside. And maybe that was the most painful part, not being hated but being forgotten. I found a small bench near the church steps and sat down. My purse rested in my lap, light almost empty. $200,000. 40 years of saving. And in return, not even a seat at the table. I stared at the gold ring on my finger, the one my husband had slipped on years ago. He used to say, family is forever. But forever, it seemed, had an expiration date. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't fall. I was too tired to cry, too numb to rage. I whispered to myself, I don't need a chair inside that room. I built it with my own hands. I gave her everything, even the chance to forget me. A group of children ran past, laughing, tossing flower petals that caught in my skirt. I smiled faintly, because even in heartbreak, life continues. As the sun began to set, the music inside grew louder, the sound of clinking glasses, of laughter, of a world I no longer belonged to. Through the glass, I saw Melissa again, dancing with David, her eyes full of the same joy I once had when I looked at her father. But behind that smile, I saw something else, something fleeting, a flicker of guilt, a shadow of recognition. Maybe deep down she knew what she'd done, maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. Because that night, I understood something I'd never wanted to face. Sometimes the children we raise with love grow into strangers. Sometimes they chase dreams that have no room for the people who gave them life. I sat there until the lights dimmed and the laughter faded. When the doors finally closed, I rose to my feet, straightened my scarf, and walked away. No one stopped me. No one noticed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like I'd buried my husband all over again. Only this time, I was burying the child we raised together. And as I walked down that empty street, I whispered to the night I didn't lose her to death. I lost her to a love that asked her to erase me. That was the night I realized I hadn't just given away my savings. I'd funded my own disappearance. After the wedding, Melissa and David moved away. No goodbye. No call. Not even a message to say they'd arrived safely. The house I helped pay for the one David had promised would be our home suddenly felt like a foreign land sealed off from me. At first, I tried to be understanding. Newlyweds needed space. They were starting a new life, a new chapter. I told myself she'd call soon. She just needed time. But a week passed, then 2, then a month, and the phone stayed silent. Each morning, I woke up and stared at that little black device, waiting for it to ring. Each night, I went to bed whispering, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. So one afternoon, I gathered my courage and decided to visit them to see my daughter's face, to make sure she was all right. I even baked her favorite apple pie, the same one I used to make on her birthdays. When I arrived at their neighborhood, everything looked perfect. White fences, trimmed hedges, shiny cars. It was the kind of place I used to dream she'd live in one day. I walked up to the gate, smiling, clutching the pie like a peace offering. But before I could press the bell, a security guard stepped forward. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, still smiling. "I'm here to see my daughter, Melissa Hayes. She lives here in Unit 24. The guard checked his list, frowning. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the approved visitors list." "Oh, I must be. I'm her mother." Mrs. Hayes said no visitors without permission, especially family. The words hit harder than I expected. I tried to explain. "There must be a mistake. Tell her it's me. She'll—" He cut me off gently but firmly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I have strict orders. You'll need to leave." I stood there, speechless, clutching the pie as my hands began to tremble. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a curtain shift, a figure standing at the window, watching. For a brief second, I wondered if it was her, if she'd seen me, if her heart had stirred even a little. But the curtain closed, and I was left standing in the cold. Slowly, I turned and walked away. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of 40 years pressing down on my back. The pie grew cold in my hands before I reached the bus stop. When I finally got back to my small rented apartment, the silence greeted me like an old friend. I placed the untouched pie on the counter and sat at the kitchen table. For a long time, I just stared at it. The cinnamon crust, The golden top, all the love I'd poured into it now meaningless. I whispered, "She doesn't want me anymore." The words hung in the air, sharp and real. I looked around the room, the faded curtains, the cracked floor tiles, the empty shelves where my photo albums used to be. Everything I had ever owned, everything I had built was gone. Sold. And for what? For a promise of love that never existed. I opened my wallet. Inside were a few crumpled bills, all I had left from the $200,000 I'd once called my future. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream. But there was no one left to hear me. So I did the only thing I could. I reached for the photo on the wall, the one of my late husband. He was smiling, his arm around me, holding baby Melissa in his hands. Her tiny face was pressed against his chest, eyes bright, full of life. I traced her little face with my finger and whispered, "I'm sorry, darling. I failed. She's not the girl we raised. I don't know who she's become." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I wiped them away before they could fall. Crying wouldn't change anything, and I'd already shed too many tears for people who didn't look back. The days blurred into weeks. The apartment grew colder. So did I. I stopped opening the curtains, stopped cooking, stopped calling. What was the point? The phone never rang. No one knocked. Sometimes I'd walk past the park and see other mothers sitting with their daughters, laughing, holding hands, sharing coffee. And I'd wonder, when did love start keeping score? When did motherhood become a debt instead of a gift? One night, as the rain tapped gently on the window, a sharp pain shot through my chest. It was sudden, deep, like a hand squeezing my heart. I tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. The room blurred. I reached for the phone, my fingers shaking. 911, I managed to whisper. Then, darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The ceiling was white, the air smelled of antiseptic, and the steady beep of the heart monitor echoed in my ears. A nurse smiled gently. "You had a heart attack, Mrs. Martin. You're lucky you called when you did." Lucky! I looked around the room. Sterile walls, no flowers, no cards, no familiar faces. Just me. The nurse asked softly, "Do you have anyone we can call?" I nodded weakly. "My daughter, Melissa Hayes." She scribbled down the number and stepped outside. Minutes passed. Then she came back, her expression uneasy. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The number you gave, it's been disconnected." Disconnected. That word echoed louder than any heart monitor. I turned my head toward the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Each one looked like a tiny tear falling from a sky that no longer cared. That night, as I lay there alone, listening to the rhythm of my fragile heart, I whispered into the darkness, "You did it, Helen. You gave her everything. And now, you have nothing left. Not even her." I wanted to hate her, but the truth is I couldn't. Because even after everything, she was still my child. I closed my eyes and prayed not for forgiveness, not for another chance, but for peace. Just a little peace before the end. The doctor said I'd need months to recover, but I knew recovery wasn't just about the heart. Mine had been breaking for years. This was just the final crack. When I was discharged, I walked out with a small bag of clothes and a bottle of pills. No one came to pick me up. Outside the hospital, the sky had cleared. The rain had stopped. I stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind brushing my face. And I realized I had survived the heart attack. But the real death, the one that took my joy, my trust, my purpose, that had happened long before. It happened the moment my daughter turned her back and shut the door. When the hospital finally released me, I stepped into the sunlight, feeling lighter, not because I was healed, but because there was nothing left to lose. The nurse wished me luck, pressing a small envelope of prescriptions into my hand. "Take it easy, Mrs. Martin," she said kindly. I nodded. "I've been taking it easy my whole life. Maybe it's time I stopped." Back at my apartment, the air felt still like a room, waiting for someone who'd never return. Dust covered the photo frames, the dishes, even the piano key I used to tap when I needed courage. I looked around, and whispered, "This isn't the ending, Helen. You've survived worse." I didn't know what that meant yet, but fate, or maybe justice, had already begun to stir. That evening, as I poured myself a cup of lukewarm tea, there was a knock at the door. No one ever knocked anymore. My heart stuttered. When I opened it, a tall man stood there, neatly dressed, holding a leather briefcase. He looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Helen Martin." "Yes," I said cautiously. "My name is Robert Turner. I'm an attorney. I believe we need to talk." An attorney. The word made me uneasy. Had something gone wrong with my medical bills? Or worse, had David found another way to use my name? I gestured him inside. "Please sit." He settled across from me, opening his briefcase. His tone was calm, professional, but there was something urgent in his eyes. "Mrs. Martin, I'm representing Sarah Hayes, the ex-wife of your son-in-law, David Hayes." I blinked. "David? Was married before?" "Yes. They divorced 3 years ago. She recently contacted me because David's been trying to sell property under questionable circumstances." "Property?" I frowned. "I don't own any property anymore." He paused. "Actually, you do. The house your daughter and David are living in, it's still in your name." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That can't be right. "I gave them all the money they bought it." "Yes," he said gently, "but the deed was never transferred. The title remains under Helen Martin. It's legally yours." I stared at him, stunned. All this time, they'd been living in a house built from my sacrifice, and they hadn't even bothered to make it theirs. "Why? Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. He took off his glasses, meeting my eyes. "Because David is trying to sell the house, and he's forging your signature to do it." The room spun. Images flashed in my mind: the wedding, the locked gate, the pie I'd baked, the hospital bed, and now this. Even betrayal, it seemed, had layers. My hands trembled. "He's selling my house." "Yes, ma'am. We intercepted the paperwork just in time. He's filed under a false power of attorney, claiming you're incapacitated." I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Incapacitated? He might be right. I must have been out of my mind to trust him. The lawyer's voice softened. "You have 2 choices, Mrs. Martin. You can let it go, or you can fight back. Legally, quietly, on your terms." I looked down at my worn hands, the same hands that had cleaned floors, cooked meals, and held my daughter's face when she was little. They still shook, but now they were steadying. "I'm not after revenge, Mr. Turner," I said slowly. "I just want what's right. Not for me, but for the woman I used to be. The one who believed love could fix anything." He nodded. "Then we'll start by freezing the sale and filing a fraud claim." For the first time in months, I felt something warm flicker inside me. Not anger, not hope, purpose. The next few weeks were a blur of signatures, affidavits, and court filings. Robert handled the paperwork. I signed where he pointed. We moved quietly. No headlines, no drama. I didn't want to humiliate my daughter. I only wanted the truth to see daylight. When the court summons arrived, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the envelope. My heart whispered, "Don't do this. She'll hate you." But my soul answered, "She already does." So I showed up. In the courtroom, David stood beside his lawyer, all charm and confidence. Melissa sat behind him, pale, avoiding my gaze. When she finally looked up, our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw the little girl who used to clutch my hand crossing the street. Then she looked away. The judge asked simple questions. Robert presented the evidence, the deed, the bank transfers, the forged signature. David's composure cracked when confronted with the documents. He stammered, he blamed, he denied. But the truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time. By the end of the hearing, the ruling was clear. The property belonged to Helen Martin. David Hayes was to be investigated for fraud. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat there, quiet, letting justice breathe. Afterward, outside the courtroom, Melissa approached me. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman torn between love and shame. Would you have listened? I asked softly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. David stormed past, his face twisted with anger. You'll regret this, old woman, he hissed. But I didn't, because regret is for those who act too late. I was finally on time. A month later, the investigation concluded. David was charged with attempted fraud and forgery. His accounts were frozen, his charm useless now. Melissa tried to hold their life together, but without his lies to stand on, it all came crashing down. She came to see me once thin, tired, hollow. He's gone, she whispered. He took everything. I poured her tea and nodded. No, sweetheart. He didn't take everything. You still have a chance to remember who you are. She looked at me, eyes full of tears. Mom, I don't deserve your kindness. I touched her hand. Maybe not. But you deserve a lesson. We all do. When the legal dust settled, I sat with Robert one last time. He asked, what would you like to do with the house? Mrs. Martin. I thought of the cold marble floors, the gold chandeliers, the echoing emptiness. A monument to vanity, not love. I smiled. Sell it. His eyebrows rose. Sell it. After everything, yes. Because a house isn't a home when it's built on betrayal. The sale closed quietly without fanfare. When the check arrived, more money than I'd ever seen in my life, I didn't keep a cent. I walked into the bank, withdrew the full amount, and signed it over to a new account. When the teller asked, what should we name the foundation? I said softly, the Martin Memorial Scholarship for children who've lost their fathers, but not their hope. As I left, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen to rise without stepping on anyone else. That night, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors I hadn't noticed before. I poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for the man I still missed every day. I lifted my cup and whispered, we did it, love. We didn't raise a fool, just a child who forgot her way. But maybe she'll find it again. And for the first time in a long time, I believed she would. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant. Not the sharp, confident rhythm of a stranger, but the uncertain tap of someone who no longer knew if they were welcome. I rose slowly from my chair, heart heavy with a strange calm. When I opened the door, I saw her, Melissa. Her eyes were swollen, her hair tangled, her clothes wrinkled like she hadn't slept in days. The woman who once glowed with youth and certainty now stood small and fragile, clutching a torn handbag and a face full of regret. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick years of pride, disappointment, and unspoken apologies, filling the space like fog. Finally, she whispered, Mom, he's gone. David left me. He took everything. Her voice cracked. The house, the car, even the savings. I'm living in a motel. I have nothing. I studied her face, not to judge, but to remember. This was the girl I once carried on my hip, the girl who fell asleep in my lap, the girl I gave everything to. But this was also the woman who had thrown me out of her wedding, who had looked me in the eyes and chosen love over blood. I wanted to be angry. But all I felt was a quiet sorrow, the kind that doesn't burn, only aches. Come in, I said softly. She stepped inside, glancing around my small apartment as if realizing for the first time how humble it really was. Her eyes fell on the single photo on the wall, her father holding her when she was little. She reached out, touching the frame. I used to think we were poor, she said quietly. We weren't, I replied. We just didn't waste what we didn't have. She turned to me, tears pooling. Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought I was building a future. I thought if I gave him everything, he'd love me more. But he just used me. I nodded slowly. You wanted love. There's no shame in that. But love built on sacrifice isn't real if it demands your soul in return. She sank into the chair, her shoulders shaking. You warned me. I didn't listen. I sat across from her, folding my hands. Do you remember I asked gently why I lived the way I did? Why I saved every dollar, every coin? She looked up confused. You said, It was for the future. Yes, I said. For your future. For mine. For a time when we might need it. Money can buy a roof, food safety, but it can't buy dignity. That you keep by the choices you make. Melissa covered her face, sobbing. I wanted love. I wanted to be chosen. I thought, if I made him happy, he'd never leave. I reached out, resting a hand over hers. Real love doesn't demand you sell the people who built you. It doesn't ask you to turn your back on the hands that fed you. Her sobs deepened. Mom, I've lost everything. I don't even have a home. I took a breath, feeling the weight of my decision before I spoke. No, you haven't lost everything. You're still breathing. You still have 2 hands, 2 feet, and a heart that can learn again. From my drawer, I pulled out a small envelope and placed it in front of her. She stared at it, hesitant. What's this? A check, I said quietly. $10,000. Her eyes widened. Mom, I can't take this. After everything I did, I interrupted, my tone firm but calm. You will take it. Not because you deserve it, but because I want you to have a chance. This isn't charity. It's a lesson. She hesitated, tears glistening. $10,000 won't buy back what I lost. No, I said. It's not meant to. It's not enough to rebuild what he destroyed. But it's enough to start your own life, the one you should have built years ago. Enough to find a small apartment, a job, a purpose. Her hands trembled as she held the envelope. Mom, why are you helping me after all the pain I caused? I looked at her, really looked, and saw not a betrayer, but a lost child, finally returning home. Because anger won't heal what love can still reach. Because forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it gives it meaning. She covered her mouth, choking back sobs. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I whispered, but you need it. And maybe I need it too. We sat there in silence, the kind that hums softly when words are no longer needed. After a while, she said, I don't know how to start again. I smiled gently. You start small, one honest job, one good decision, one apology at a time. Don't look for love in people who need saving. Look for it in those who help you stand. She nodded, clutching the envelope like it was both a lifeline and a burden. I'll make it right, Mom. I promise. Don't promise me, I said softly. Promise yourself. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door, turning back one last time. Will you ever trust me again? I took a long breath. Trust is like glass, Melissa. When it breaks, you can piece it together, but the cracks will always show. That's not a punishment. It's a reminder. Learn from it. Her lip trembled. I love you, Mom. For the first time in years, I heard it not from guilt, not from duty, but from truth. And even though it hurt, it healed something too. I love you too, I whispered. Now go live a life that would make your father proud. She nodded, eyes shining, and stepped out into the fading light. I watched her from the doorway as she walked down the street, small but steady, the same way she once took her first steps, clutching my fingers for balance. And as her figure disappeared around the corner, I felt the wind brush my cheek like a gentle hand. It carried a whisper I hadn't heard in years, my husband's voice soft and sure. You did good, Helen. You did good. I closed the door and looked around my little apartment, still quiet, still simple. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty. Because forgiveness, I realized, doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Still, I knew not everyone would understand. Some would say I should have walked away, that she deserved nothing, that justice demanded coldness, not compassion. But I'd learned something they hadn't. When life takes everything from you, grace is the one thing it can't steal. I sat back down at my table, poured 2 cups of tea, and placed one across from me. Lifting my cup, I smiled faintly and whispered, here's to second chances, not for the ones who hurt us, but for the ones we choose to become. And in the quiet of that small, humble room, I knew my story wasn't one of loss, but of letting go. People often ask me if I regret it, if I regret forgiving her, if I regret giving her that check, if I regret opening the door at all. And sometimes when the nights grow long and the wind whispers through the cracks, I wonder the same thing. Maybe I should have turned her away. Maybe I should have let her taste the loneliness she once handed me. Maybe I should have told her, "You made your bed. Now lie in it." But motherhood isn't a contract. It's a promise. A promise that doesn't vanish just because love goes wrong. Many people say I'm foolish, that I should have cut her out, let her face the consequences alone. They call me weak for forgiving someone who betrayed me so deeply. They say a woman who's been humiliated should never offer her hand again. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't help the woman who threw me out of her wedding. I didn't help the stranger who chose greed over gratitude. I helped the little girl who once held my hand on her first day of school. The one who cried in my lap when her heart was broken. The one who used to whisper, "Mom, don't ever leave me." That little girl didn't die. She just got lost, buried under pride fear, in the wrong kind of love. So when she came back empty-handed and hollow-eyed, I didn't see a traitor. I saw a soul, finally ready to learn. I didn't forgive her to erase what happened. I forgave her so it wouldn't own me anymore. Because holding on to anger doesn't make you strong, it just keeps you chained to the past. And I'd already spent too many years behind invisible bars. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's reclaiming the power to decide who you are, not what pain made you. That's why I gave her that check. Not to reward her mistakes, but to remind her she could still rise without selling her heart again. $10,000. Not enough to rebuild a mansion, but enough to build a life. Enough to start again on her own terms. Enough to remember the value of earning, not taking. I didn't want her gratitude. I didn't need her praise. What I wanted was peace. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to believe that the girl I raised still lived somewhere inside her. So yes, I helped her. Not the woman who betrayed me, but the daughter who once made me proud. The ambitious woman who replaced her, the one who sneered at my warnings, who chose appearances over affection, who cast me out on her wedding day. I left her behind long ago. In that marble hall, in that white dress, in that moment when she closed the doors and called it perfection. That version of her, the one who chose the world over her mother, I buried her there along with my tears. And when I walked away, I took only what mattered. The love that survives disappointment, the strength that blooms in silence, and the grace to let go without forgetting. Now, years later, when I see her again, older, humbler, steadier, I no longer see betrayal. I see scars and growth. And I know those scars didn't come cheap. Sometimes we learn through wisdom, sometimes through loss. She learned through both. And me, I learned that justice doesn't always roar in courtrooms. Sometimes it whispers in the quiet act of doing what's right when the world says you shouldn't. Because revenge might make a wound feel smaller. But forgiveness closes it. I still sit by the window every evening, pouring 2 cups of tea. One for me, one for the memory of the man who taught me that love is only real when it forgives. The world might never understand, but that's all right. We don't forgive for applause. We forgive so we can sleep at night. And when I close my eyes, I don't see the woman who betrayed me anymore. I see a child running through the yard laughing. I see her holding a dandelion, whispering wishes into the wind. And I think maybe one of those wishes was for a second chance. Maybe I just gave her one. So if you think I'm foolish, maybe you're right. But I'd rather be foolish with an open heart than wise with a locked one. After all, love the real kind isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we choose to give, even when it hurts. So, I'll leave you with this question. If you were me, would you forgive the child who cast you out of her wedding, who turned love into shame and only came back when everything was gone? Would you open your door again? Would you hand her the means to begin anew? Tell me in the comments, would you say yes, because blood is thicker than betrayal? Or would you say no, because some wounds should never be reopened? I want to know what you would do, because sometimes the hardest justice is mercy.